Good morning, everybody. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here to give the keynote address for this very, very important conference happening in Uganda. I am deeply sorry that I'm not there. I have many friends in this country. It is a beautiful country, and it is also a country struggling to build and grow itself. And I remain amazed by the resilience of the Ugandan people always. So, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, of course, all protocols observed, I would like to talk to you about why financing a just and inclusive recovery is so important, but also why it is actually possible. It is realistic. It can be within the grasp of countries. It is a struggle, of course. It is not going to be easy, but it is possible. Throughout the pandemic, and while some countries will tell you that the pandemic is over for them, it is not over for many developing countries, especially least developing countries. And the continuing effect often reminds me of the crocodile sitting in the water. You see the little bit above the water, but the bulk of the problems remain under the water. And this continues to be a challenge because we cannot always see how big the crocodile is, of course, or how problematic it is for everybody. But that brings me to how do we get this just and inclusive recovery going? And of course, how do we build back better? There are several reports that my mandate has produced, which can be easily accessible off the UN website, my mandate of foreign debt and international financial obligations. But also I have been working in this field for a long time, and I will tell you that there have been many responses, from austerity measures to increasing taxation on the wealthy, from giving cash transfers, to continuing to have food and soup kitchens in different places to keep people going. But now, as we are moving forward and trying to move towards a semblance of what we hope will be life the way it was before COVID, I don't think life is going to be the same for a very, very long time forward. It is going to take a few more years to recover, but that is why, more importantly today than ever before, a human rights approach becomes so incredibly important. I often use the tagline, rights require resources. I noticed it's one of the hashtags for this conference as well. And rights do require resources. Financing resources, effort in kind, of course, as well. It is not only about money, but resources do require a huge amount of fiscal resources to do this. And achieving these rights take on two dynamics. We have, of course, the content rights, but we also have the procedural rights. And in financing the rights, it is very important to pay as much attention to procedural rights as we do to the content-based rights. However, within the content-based rights, it is so important to continue to play great importance to not only the informal sector, but also to women, and ensure that there is equitable access in the systems always. There is a lot of implicit and explicit bias in the systems, and ensuring that we take care of that to make sure everyone is part of the system will continue to be a very important step forward. The second issue I think is quite important is issues around public services. We need to finance health. Many African countries have committed to spending parts of their budgets, for example, under the AU to health, to education. We need to make sure that countries are doing that and that they are held up and responsible to their obligations. And if you noticed, I've talked about equity, I've talked about now responsibility, and it's also about accountability, making sure that citizens can hold governments accountable. Very, very important. But these social protection measures also that have been put in place during COVID will need to stay in place in many countries around the world on a more long-term basis. Recovery is not immediate. The ripple effect on economies in the developing world, especially least developing countries, is even worse than what happens in the developed world very often, but the ripple effects also last much longer. So while the bigger, more resilient economies recover faster, we need to be aware that the developing countries do not. Taxation and fiscal policy is another issue that I think remains very crucial. Having wealth taxes, knowing how taxes are spent, where they're taken from, that they are taken efficiently, that we're not wasting resources in its reallocation, that we are redistributing properly. Not only domestic taxes, but also the international tax platforms. We need to engage in all of these spaces to ensure that there is an equitable share of revenue across the board. But we also need to say that what we are spending is done very, very carefully. Transparently is an important process, and we need to look at it. We also have great concerns now as we continue in what is looking like a global economic crisis. Some say depression, and that is the issue around surging public debt. We have to understand public debt not only from global international institutions, but also debt that is being taken on through private creditors. It is a complex space, but it is very important that these resources are tabulated transparently and that citizens and the states are able to engage on how these are going forward. I want to conclude by saying that there are key principles of fiscal legitimacy which I often refer to, and that is transparency, accountability, and responsibility, all of which I've already mentioned earlier, efficiency and effectiveness, which I've also spoken about, and very importantly, fairness and justice. In whatever we look at, when we look at the fiscal system, when we look at recovery, when we look at finances, if people, if stakeholders in a system do not see fairness and justice, and of course inclusivity, one of the themes of this conference, together with justice, then the ability of a state to recover will be severely impeded. And it is really important that we carry everybody together. There is a wonderful proverb in my country, Kenya, where we say that we may share the same sun, but we do not share the same hut or the same roofs. And I love this proverb because it is reflective of the fact that the state is giving us a lot of support and protection, but how we spread it across different people, across different geographical regions, it will vary. But we are in that same sunshine together, and the sun needs to reach everybody, no matter what. And with those few words, I'd like to say it's a pleasure and an honor to have been part of this. I wish I could have been there physically, but unfortunately it was not possible. And I wish you all the best in these wonderful deliberations. I know some of them will be recorded as well, and I look forward to going through them afterwards. Have a wonderful time in Uganda, and wish I was there with you. Thank you very much.